You've just tuned into Inner Station, where the latest and hottest topics are always on air. I'm your host, Cami, and each episode we set up heat with fun chats, fire insights, and special guest appearances, with some surprises along the way. Now, South Africa's energy landscape is shifting, and this time the stakes are pretty high. With energy performance certificates now mandatory for building owners, the countdown to compliance has begun. And those who don't meet the December deadline could be facing more than just penalties. They also risk being left behind in a future defined by sustainability and accountability. Now, in this episode, we're redefining the game in the energy sector with someone who knows it inside out. We've got Zadok Olinga, who is the founder and director of Ölinga. Welcome to Inner Station, Zadok.
Hi, Cami. Thank you. Appreciate being here.
Of course, we're so happy to have you. Now, Zadok, you are quite accomplished in the energy sector, and you have great insight into a few others as well. But before we pick your brain on everything that's been happening in the energy space, let's help the audience to get to know you a little bit. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you got to starting Ölinga in the first place?
Okay. Well, that's a good start. I was thinking of how to answer this question. I don't often have to think about, who I am and so forth. So I'm a South African trained engineer, electrical and electronic engineer. Studied at the University of Pretoria, and I've been in the industry for around 14 years. I got my start on the ESCOM EEDSM program, where I did a whole bunch of measurement and verification on their program to reduce our demand. And during that time, we managed to save, I believe, 40 gigawatts of demand, reduce the demand, which is, I think, equivalent to one power station's worth from implementing energy efficiency and demand side management initiatives, which were sponsored and backed by ESCOM. From then on, that was during my master's studies. After my master's, I then went into industry, went into consulting, focusing a lot on the tax incentives around energy efficiency, still doing measurement and verification. And then during that time, my wife and I had a child, and for some reason, that seemed to be the perfect time to step out and start Ölinga. So I started Ölinga in 2019, and we've been going strong since then. It was more about a culmination about 14 years of work to, put all my talents and drive them in one direction, a direction that I'm more comfortable with, a direction that I can manage. Yeah.
I think that's a cool story, and to have like one kid and then birth a whole company as well. That's really cool.
It seemed to work.
As like earlier in the year, and I mean throughout the year as well, there have been reports on the new mandatory energy performance certificates that are required for building owners, and some of the penalties that they'll face if they fail to comply by December this year. And some of these penalties include sort of being liable for a fine of up to 5 million rand and even facing jail time. Why are the repercussions for like non-compliance so high here?
Well, look, the truth is government hates all of you. They want to punish. You gave them a hard time during the load shedding thing, and now this is how they get you back. But jokes aside, the penalties are high because government would like to incentivize and push people to implement, to adopt and implement this legislation. In South Africa, we sort of have a bit of a culture of stubbornness and non-compliance. If you remember the e-tolls, all of us kept on going and going and going and never paid the e-tolls until government eventually gave up. And I think the idea is to send out a signal that this is not going anywhere. There will be penalties for this. And I do believe it's not going anywhere. But more than that, government has made specific commitments at COP and at the United Nations. They've made commitments to decarbonize. The EPC is seen as a first step in decarbonizing and greening the built environment in South Africa. So that would make our buildings more livable, more cost effective for the owners, and more energy efficient, meaning that they will use less energy from the grid, which will open up capacity for industry
Yeah.
and so forth. So that's quite important. Buildings contribute 15% to our carbon emissions, and I believe contribute to 30%, 30 to 35% of our energy consumption, which we know is primarily driven by coal in South Africa.
Yeah.
So decarbonizing the buildings is a very key step for government. And so they're very serious about the EPC program because it will allow them to get a picture of the built environment in South Africa. Yeah.
And that makes sense. I mean, one of the bigger sort of commitments that you hear about in the energy space a lot is sort of the goal that everybody has to reach net zero carbon emissions by 2050, right? And so it makes sense that like the UPC would be one of the things that the government is really pushing to try to honor that commitment. And for businesses, there is a lot of, I think just in the sustainability space in general, you hear a lot about greenwashing, which is essentially when a company will use their branding and marketing to appear to be more environmentally friendly than they actually are. I want to know from you what this looks like within like the South African context. Do you think organizations are truly doing everything that they can to sort of meet the net zero goal that we have, or are they just, putting on?
So I think in South Africa, we try a lot. I think we have a very well-established framework of rules and regulations that people follow. We have a very well-established corporate culture in South Africa, following a lot of the rules, and the JSE is pretty strict in enforcing them. However, when we look at ESG, for example, reporting and so forth, there isn't a central body that monitors or evaluates what's in the ESG report. So a company can go out, get a consultancy to compile its ESG report, and they will issue it. It doesn't go through any other checks and balances that are independent from the company itself. That's why one of the things that we do at Ölinga is measurement and verification. We serve as an independent measurement and verification body for energy savings, for example. And the way to measure carbon emissions savings, for example, is to look at the energy savings and then, convert those to the carbon emission savings, because typically your diesel, your coal, your heavy fuel oil, you name it, those contribute to your primary emissions, and then your electricity to your secondary emissions. But in terms of greenwashing, typically it's a lot of corporate branding. We have this thing called carbon offsets, which to me is slightly a bit greenwashing, but it's embedded into our carbon tax legislation in South Africa. But if you look at it, it doesn't necessarily encourage an anthropogenic reduction of carbon emissions. It's more, as it says, offsetting. Your emissions go to someone else, so you can claim, green credentials. But if we look at South Africa's borders, you haven't actually reduced the emissions within the country itself. So that's sort of slight negative there with the offsets.
Yeah, and I want to touch on that a little bit, right? Because there is this push to like reduce carbon emissions, but what do you think are some like quick wins that businesses can get into to try to reduce their carbon footprint to sort of contribute to the reduction of our carbon emissions as a country? And also, does it differ? Does it differ depending on the sizes of the businesses? Small businesses, large businesses, big buildings, small businesses.
So if we're looking at it from a percentage perspective, it differs based on the type of business. So a business that is very energy intensive and uses highly dense energy sources will struggle to move away from those sources. However, if they implement any interventions in terms of improving their energy efficiency, improving their processes and so forth, that little reduction that they implement will result into a lot of carbon emission savings. If we look at the built environment, for example, their carbon emissions would primarily be Scope 2 carbon emissions. Those are emissions due to the consumption of electricity from our grid. So the easiest way for them to reduce their carbon emissions would be to, number one, put in alternative energy, so renewable energy. So solar would be a big one. You would reduce your Scope 2 emissions like that. Number two, I would actually say this is number one, because you want to go efficient first. So implementing energy efficiency by upgrading the HVAC system, controlling it better, retrofitting the energy drivers within the building, putting in behavioral changes. Once you've done that, you lower your demand to a certain level, and then you design your solar system for that level. That way, you're not baking in inefficiencies and you're not baking in unnecessary energy, capital cost on your solar
Mm.
design. Then you put in your solar, and now you mitigate those scope 2 carbon emissions. So I would say the first step for any business looking to mitigate its carbon emissions is to have a comprehensive audit, comprehensive energy audit, carbon audit of its business and its processes. From then, figure out interventions that can be implemented because these will be particular to your process, particular to your company, particular to your energy source. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty much it.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then now let's take that to a broader sort of scale and
Yeah.
speak on South Africa just in general, right? Is there
Mm.
is this increasing pressure that not just our country, but like every country is facing to reduce their to be more carbon efficient. But a
Mm.
lot of this conversation focuses very much on the benefits and sort of the importance of this shift. But what
Mm.
potential challenges or drawbacks should we be mindful of, especially within a South African context where we are sort of a developing nation?
Yeah. So that's a very good question,
Mm.
question that policymakers, I think, grapple with all the time. So, if we look at current global trends, we look at Europe, we look at the USA, uh, due to this drive for AI and artificial intelligence, for example, amongst
Yeah,
many other industries, there is a need for more and more energy.
yeah,
So, you're seeing nuclear power stations being restarted. You're seeing coal-fired power stations being restarted. The war in Ukraine, for example, has also encouraged this trend. So we cannot be the ones rushing to decarbonize by changing our energy source, if I can put it
mm,
up. South Africa is very dependent on coal. We've got the coal belt, I believe, in Mpumalanga.
yeah,
Uh, and we need to use it in conjunction with being efficient in how we use it, in adopting clean technologies in how we use it. The
mm,
reason for that is energy is the lifeblood of any economy. If you don't have enough energy, you cannot industrialize. You cannot develop your economy fast enough. China is a case in point. They had to solve their energy challenge to make sure that they develop very fast. And
yeah,
it's worked out miraculously for them. So as a developing nation, I believe we shouldn't be rushing to decarbonize if our primary and most affordable source is coal
mm,
or whatever oil or whatever else it is that we use. I think the priority has to be put on economic development, the adoption of technologies that work in conjunction with what we have. So we take a step-by-step process to decarbonization and not rushing. Beyond that, we have a demographic challenge. Most of Africa, for example, I think 65% of our population is between the age of 16 and 30. Those are
mm,
young people who need a lot of jobs. Those are young people who need a future to look forward to. We
yeah,
cannot kneecap our economies because we'll be kneecapping those people and creating socioeconomic problems for ourselves. We need to ensure that there are jobs for people.
mm,
Now, when you look at the processes involved in creating energy right now, they employ a lot more people. But if you
yeah,
look at the alternatives, wind power, solar power, and so forth, they, at the moment, due to economic situation, cannot employ as many people as a coal-fired power station, for example. So you
right,
can't take that source of employment and remove it and have this one that adopts a few people for a year or two and then lets them go. So we have to be very cognizant of our need to develop economically and our
yeah.
need to decarbonize. I think that's the summary.
And I think that's very interesting because a lot of the time when I've had conversations about like anything energy and like energy solutions, the
Mm,
focus is always on finding an alternative source
mm,
versus trying to use the source that we do have more efficiently. So I think that
yeah.
is an important point to like pay
Mm,
attention to is the fact that yeah, of course you can't rush to just go and adopt a whole new thing when you're not being super efficient with what you do have in the moment. So I
mm.
think yeah, that's interesting.
The thing is, in South Africa, government implements this carrot and stick approach.
Yeah.
They stick the carrot in you and beat you up with a stick.
Mhm.
Joke, by the way. But the carrot is the Section 12L tax incentive and the
Yeah.
ESCOM incentive that they give you for energy efficiency and demand side management. The stick is your carbon tax. So if you implement energy efficiency interventions, you mitigate your carbon emissions, and government gives you a tax incentive of 95 cents per kilowatt hour. So for people who are heavy energy consumers and can't afford to decarbonize overnight, they can implement efficiency interventions throughout the operations to reduce their carbon footprint a little bit, and government will actually reward them for that through incentives that are available.
Okay. Well, Zadok, that was very interesting. I have learned quite a bit just looking into all of these certificates and stuff preparing for this episode. And I hope everybody tuning in has as well. And we will be keeping an eye on sort of what the developments are once, obviously, the deadline. I think the deadline is like the 7th of December. So once the deadline has passed, just trying to see what new reports are popping up about sort of what the moves have been in that regard. But before I let you go, I'd like to play a little game of hot takes with you. And how it works is I'm going to give you 3 categories. You're going to choose one of them. And then from whichever category that you choose, you answer a mystery question.
Okay.
Cool. So your 3 categories are politics, history, and business.
Politics.
Politics, okay. Your question is, you have suddenly become the leader of a nation for the next 24 hours. What would you do with this time? Like, what is your first move?
So I've got 24 hours, right?
You've got 24 hours.
What time do I find out that I've become the leader of this nation?
Like,
because the first thing is to have an after party.
yeah.
Second thing is to invite in the finance minister and find out where we can get all the money to set up some nice power stations to make sure that our energy consumption is at peaks. And then the next thing to do is to, can't be done in 24 hours. Find some guys who bullied me and just shit on them. I'm sorry, but I'm petty. That's what I would do, actually.
Listen, I'm just as petty as you are. So I would literally give you the news at like 3 a.m. That way you have time to find the guys, have the meeting with the finance minister, and then after party in the evening.
There we go.
Pretty good flow.
Pretty good flow.
This has been so great speaking to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to everybody at home for joining us as well. And please do give us your take in the comments on today's conversation. And don't forget to subscribe and give this video a like and turn on your post notifications so that you know when our next drop comes. Any last words, Zadok?
No last words from me. Just thank you for this session. It's been a great pleasure speaking to you. And I believe South Africa is a tremendous country and we have a great future ahead of us. With the right policy and with perseverance, we'll get there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Zadok.